pictures now of where the storm has hit. We're seeing the damage there.
Yeah. It's a lot different than seeing it on the radar, Danny. As impressive as that looks, the images coming out of the Caribbean are just horrifying right now.
Yeah, this makes me feel nervous, but seeing those images, it's the pit in your stomach feeling. It is really devastating, the impacts that we've already seen from Irma. And unfortunately, for a lot of these small islands, it's not over. Even with wind speeds dropping 5 miles per hour from last night at 11 p.m., not going to bring a big difference in terms of the severity of the impacts as Irma continues to track into the Caribbean and headed into a few of the islands of the Bahamas. Right now, the center just north of the eastern portion of the Dominican Republic, pulling away from Puerto Rico. Still seeing some messy weather in Puerto Rico as it stands right now, but the later we get into this morning, the quieter conditions will start to become, and of course then they'll be able to start assessing the damage. And although the eye stayed north of Puerto Rico and it's staying north of the Dominican Republic, you have to remember the tropical storm force winds extend 180 miles plus outside of the center of Irma. Hurricane force 50 miles outside of the center, so they might have escaped some of the most devastating impacts because of the hurricane force wind field, but still getting those strong tropical storm force winds and of course plenty of rain and the potential for storm surge. Up next, we have the southeastern islands of the Bahamas, Turks and Caicos right here, so starting to see the weather go downhill quickly for Turks and Caicos, and unfortunately it will just continue to get worse over the course of the day. We're still looking at about 600, just over 600 miles away from the Florida Peninsula, still a few days out here. We have seen the hurricane warnings issued through portions of the Bahamas, additional warnings issued in the northeastern Bahamas today. Watches for Florida should be issued at some point today as well, just knowing that we're about 48 hours from the start of potential impacts here. Here's the track, 180 mile per hour winds, gust to 220, moving west-northwest at 17. As we head into Saturday, that still looks like timing for that potential turn, and as it stands right now, I know this is not good news for our friends and family on the East Coast, but it looks like a landfall is looking more and more likely, potentially a Category 4 hurricane as it makes landfall. As the track stands, if this verifies conditions in southwest Florida, we're looking at tropical storm force impacts. Our inland counties could potentially be on that hurricane force wind field, again extending 50 miles outside of the center. But if we can get this to move just a little further east, conditions for us again still just looking at tropical storm force. Looks like it'll weaken as it heads up to the peninsula and then potentially make landfall in North Carolina or South Carolina as a Category 1 as we head into the Tuesday, Wednesday of next week. Here are your spaghetti plots. Still looking northwest, taking that northerly turn. A couple models still have it up the west side of the state here, the west side of the peninsula, but you can see the tightest clustering hugging the eastern coastline here. A few models also push it a little further east, which would be great news for the East Coast here. Great news for West Palm, for Miami. But it does look like the tightest clustering, as you can see, is just hugging the coastline. The European model does have it making landfall, at least the latest run, I should say. The European model does have it making landfall and then sliding up the coast. And as you can see, if this is the case, our inland counties would still see the potential for hurricane force winds, although our coastal communities still just looking at tropical storm force. But the GFS latest run keeps the eye just off the East Coast here, and you're probably having Matthew flashbacks with this. So this would still bring quite a few impacts to the East Coast, but it would keep just tropical storm force for our area rather than the potential for hurricane force in our inland spots. So we're still looking at a little bit of a discrepancy anywhere from about 50 to 100 miles, but that really does make all of the difference when your peninsula is only 140 miles wide. Your ensemble plots still looking again at quite a discrepancy, but it favors the tightest clustering right up the East Coast here. So we do think that is where it's going to head. As far as your driving factors go, still looking at the ridge of high pressure over the Atlantic here. Irma just trying to start to skirt up and around it, I should say. Still looking at this trough in the jet stream and then this wave of energy here that, watch as I switch this slide, it's going to drop down the country, head into the southeast. That's going to help push Irma a little further east and then pull it north as we head into the start of next week. So those are your driving factors here. That little wave of energy hopefully can push Irma another 50, 75 miles east, and the East Coast won't be looking at as severe of impacts either. But the bottom line is, as it stands right now, an East Coast landfall does look likely. For Southwest Florida, count on tropical storm-like conditions. That means sustained winds potentially 40 to 60 miles per hour as we head into timeline Saturday evening to Monday morning. Arriving a little earlier for Southeast Florida in terms of that time frame, but this is what it stands in Southwest Florida. So expect those tropical storm conditions. Your tropical Storm force wind field here. It looks like potential for arrival Sunday morning, so overnight really into Sunday. And then check this out, the percentage, the chance up to 90% chance, so a pretty solid chance of the tropical storm force winds for Southwest Florida. You see even over into coastal Lee, coastal Collier, and much of Charlotte County can count on those tropical storm force winds Sunday into Monday. But it's the hurricane force winds that, if we see them in Southwest Florida, should stay just for our inlandmost portions of our inland counties.